Welcome to the CarbSmart Podcast, where your decision to embrace low-carb nutrition becomes a fun and delicious lifestyle. I'm your host, Dana Carpenter, here to guide you through the ins and outs of everything low-carb. This show, we have something a little different. This show features something I did not write myself. That has not happened before. But let's start with this. How old is a low-carb diet? If you look at the traditional diets of various peoples, including the seal, fish, and blubber diet of the Inuit, several North American native peoples who flourished on pemmican, and the African Maasai herding people who thrived on milk, meat, and cow's blood, very old indeed. But how about low-carb diet books? So far as I know, the oldest in the English language at least is Banting's letter on Corpulence. Having lost weight and dramatically improved his health on a low-carbohydrate diet, Banting wrote and self-published the book back in the mid-Victorian era, and he distributed it for free. By the third printing, he had distributed 63,000 copies, and Banting had become synonymous with dieting. So here it is, Banting's letter on Corpulence. Like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell because you don't want to miss a single episode.
Letter on Corpulence by William Banting, 1864. Of all the parasites that affect humanity, I do not know of, nor can I imagine, any more distressing than that of obesity. And having just emerged from a very long probation in this affliction, I am desirous of circulating my humble knowledge and experience for the benefit of my fellow man, with an earnest hope that it may lead to the same comfort and happiness I now feel under the extraordinary change, which might almost be termed miraculous had it not been accomplished by the most simple common-sense means. Obesity seems to me very little understood or properly appreciated by the faculty and the public generally, or the former would, long ere this, have hit upon the cause for so lamentable a disease, and applied effective remedies, whilst the latter would have spared their injudicious indulgence in remarks and sneers, frequently painful in society, and which, even on the strongest mind, have an unhappy tendency. But I sincerely trust this humble effort at exposition may lead to a more perfect ventilation of the subject, and a better feeling for the afflicted. It would afford me infinite pleasure and satisfaction to name the author of my redemption from this calamity, as he is the only one I have been able to find, and my search has not been sparing, who seems thoroughly up in the question. But such publicity might be construed improperly, and I have, therefore, only to offer my personal experience as to the stepping stone to public investigation, and to proceed with my narrative of facts, earnestly hoping the reader will patiently peruse and thoughtfully consider it, with forbearance for any fault of style or diction, and for any seeming presumption in publishing it. I have felt some difficulty in deciding on the proper and best course of action. At one time I thought the editor of The Lancet would kindly publish a letter from me on the subject, but further reflection led me to doubt whether an insignificant individual would be noticed. In the April number of the Cornhill magazine, I read with much interest an article on the subject, defining tolerably well the effects, but offering no tangible remedy or even positive solution of the problem. What is the cause of obesity? I was pleased with the article as a whole, but objected to some portions, and had prepared a letter to the editor of that magazine offering my experience on the subject. But again, it struck me that an unknown individual like myself would have but little prospect of notice. So I finally resolved to publish and circulate this pamphlet, with no other reason, motive, or expectation than an earnest desire to help those who happen to be afflicted as I was, for that corpulence is remediable, I am well convinced, and shall be delighted if I can induce others to think so. The object I have in view impels me to enter into minute particulars as well as general observations, and to revert to bygone years in order to show that I have spared no pains nor expense to accomplish the great end of stopping and curing obesity. I am now nearly 66 years of age, about 5 feet 5 inches in stature, and in August last, 1862, weighed 202 pounds, which I think it right to name because the article in the Cornhill magazine presumes that a certain stature and age should bear, ordinarily, a certain weight, and I am quite of that opinion. I now weigh 167 pounds, showing a diminution of something like 1 pound per week since August, and having now very nearly attained the happy medium, I have perfect confidence that a few more weeks will fully accomplish the object for which I have labored for the last 30 years in vain, until it pleased Almighty Providence to direct me into the right and proper channel, the tramway, so to speak, of happy, comfortable existence. Few men have led a more active life, bodily or mentally, from a constitutional anxiety for regularity, precision, and order during 50 years' business career, from which I have now retired, so that my corpulence and subsequent obesity was not through neglect of necessary bodily activity, nor from excessive eating, drinking, or self-indulgence of any kind, except that I partook of the simple aliments of bread, milk, butter, beer, sugar, and potatoes more freely than my aged nature required, and hence, as I believe, the generation of the parasite detrimental to comfort, if not really to health. I will not presume to descant on the bodily structural tissues so fully canvassed in the Cornhill magazine, nor how they are supported and renovated, having no mind or power to enter into these questions, which properly belong to the wise heads of the faculty. None of my family on the side of either parent had any tendency to corpulence, and from my earliest years I had an inexpressible dread of such a calamity. So, when I was between 30 and 40 years of age, finding a tendency to it creeping upon me, I consulted an eminent surgeon, now long deceased, a kind personal friend, who recommended increased bodily exertion before my ordinary daily labors began, and thought rowing an excellent plan. I have the command of a good, heavy, safe boat, lived near the river, and adopted it for a couple of hours in the early morning. It is true I gained muscular vigor, but with it a prodigious appetite, which I was compelled to indulge, and consequently increased in weight, until my kind old friend advised me to forsake the exercise. He soon afterwards died, and as the tendency to corpulence remained, I consulted other high orthodox authorities, never any inferior adviser, but all in vain. I have tried sea air and bathing in various localities, with much walking exercise, taking gallons of physic and liquor potassiae, advisedly and abundantly, riding on horseback, the waters and climate of Leamington many times, as well as those of Cheltenham and Harrogate frequently, have lived upon 6 pence a day, so to speak, and earned it, if bodily labor may be so construed, and have spared no trouble nor expense in consultations with the best authorities in the land, giving each and all a fair time for experiment, without any permanent remedy, as the evil still gradually increased. I am under obligations to most of those advisers for the pains and interest they took in my case, but only to one for an effectual remedy. When a corpulent man eats, drinks, and sleeps well, has no pain to complain of, and no particular organic disease, the judgment of able men seems paralyzed, for I have been generally informed that corpulence is one of the natural results of increasing years, Indeed, one of the ablest authorities as a physician in the land told me that he had gained 1 pound in weight every year since he attained manhood, and was not surprised at my condition, but advised more bodily exercise, vapor baths, and shampooing, in addition to the medicine given. Yet the evil still increased, and like the parasite of barnacles on a ship, if it did not destroy the structure, it obstructed its fair, comfortable progress in the path of life. I have been in dock perhaps 20 times in as many years for the reduction of this disease, and with little good effect, none lasting. Anyone so afflicted is often subject to public remark, and though in conscience he may care little about it, I am confident no man laboring under obesity can be quite insensible to the sneers and remarks of the cruel and injudicious in public assemblies, public vehicles, or the ordinary street traffic, nor to the annoyance of finding no adequate space in a public assembly if he should seek amusement or need refreshment, and therefore he naturally keeps away as much as possible from places where he is likely to be made the object of the taunts and remarks of others. I am as regardless of public remark as most men, but I have felt these difficulties, and therefore avoided such circumscribed accommodation and notice, and by that means have been deprived of many advantages to health and comfort. Although of no very great size or weight, still I could not stoop to tie my shoe, so to speak, nor attend to the little offices humanity requires, without considerable pain and difficulty, which only the corpulent can understand. I have been compelled to go downstairs slowly backward to save the jar of increased weight upon the ankle and knee joints, and been obliged to puff and blow with every slight exertion, particularly that of going upstairs. I have spared no pains to remedy this by low living. Moderation and light food was generally prescribed, but I had no direct bill of fare to know what was really intended. And that, consequently, brought the system into a low, impoverished state, without decreasing corpulence, caused many obnoxious boils to appear, and 2 rather formidable carbuncles, for which I was ably operated upon and fed into increased obesity. At this juncture, about 3 years back, Turkish baths became the fashion, and I was advised to adopt them as a remedy. With the first few, I found immense benefit in power and elasticity for walking exercise, so, believing I had found the philosopher's stone, pursued them 3 times a week till I had taken 50, then less frequently, as I began to fancy, with some reason, that so many weakened my constitution, till I had taken 90, but never succeeded in losing more than 6 pounds weight during the whole course, and I gave up the plan as worthless, though I have full belief in their cleansing properties, and their value in colds, rheumatism, and many other ailments. I then fancied increased obesity materially affected a slight umbilical rupture, if it did not cause it, and that other bodily ailment to which I had been subject was also augmented. This led me to other medical advisers, to whom I am also indebted for much kind consideration, though, unfortunately, they failed in relieving me. At last, finding my sight failing and my hearing greatly impaired, I consulted, in August last, an eminent oral surgeon, who made light of the case, looked into my ears, sponged them internally, and blistered the outside, without the slightest benefit, neither inquiring into any of my bodily ailments, which he probably thought unnecessary, nor affording me even time to name them. I was not at all satisfied, but on the contrary was in a worse plight than when I went to him. However, he soon after left town for his annual holiday, which proved the greatest possible blessing to me, because it compelled me to seek other assistance. And happily I found the right man, who unhesitatingly said he believed my ailments were caused principally by corpulence, and prescribed a certain diet. No medicine, beyond a morning cordial as a corrective, with immense effect and advantage both to my hearing and the decrease of any corpulency. For the sake of argument and illustration, I will presume that certain articles of ordinary diet, however beneficial in youth, are prejudicial in advanced life, like beans to a horse whose common ordinary food is hay and corn. It may be useful food occasionally, under peculiar circumstances, but detrimental as a constancy. I will, therefore, adopt the analogy and call such food human beings. The items from which I was advised to abstain as much as possible were bread, butter, milk, sugar, beer, and potatoes, which had been the main, and I thought innocent, elements of my existence, or, at all events, they had for many years been adopted freely. These, said my excellent adviser, contain starch and saccharine matter, tending to create fat, and should be avoided altogether. At the first blush, it seemed to me that I had little left to live upon, but my kind friend soon showed me there was ample, and I was only too happy to give the plan a fair trial, and within a very few days found immense benefit from it. It may better elucidate the dietary plan if I describe generally what I have sanctioned to take, and that man must be an extraordinary person who would desire a better table. For breakfast, I take 4 or 5 ounces of beef, mutton, kidneys, broiled fish, bacon, or cold meat of any kind except pork, a large cup of tea without milk or sugar, a little biscuit, or 1 ounce of dry toast. For dinner, 5 or 6 ounces of any fish except salmon, any meat except pork, any vegetable except potato, 1 ounce of dry toast, fruit out of a pudding, any kind of poultry or game, and 2 or 3 glasses of good claret, sherry, or Madeira, champagne, port, and beer forbidden. For tea, 2 or 3 ounces of fruit, a rusk or 2, and a cup of tea without milk or sugar. For supper, 3 or 4 ounces of meat or fish, similar to dinner, with a glass or 2 of claret. For nightcap, if required, a tumbler of grog, gin, whiskey, or brandy without sugar, or a glass or 2 of claret or sherry. This plan leads to an excellent night's rest, with from 6 to 8 hours sound sleep. The dry toast or rusk may have a tablespoon of spirit to soften it, which will prove acceptable. Perhaps I did not wholly escape starchy or saccharine matter, but scrupulously avoided those beans, such as milk, sugar, beer, butter, etc., which were known to contain them. On rising in the morning, I take a tablespoonful of a special corrective cordial, which may be called the balm of life, in a wine-glass of water, a most grateful draught, as it seems to carry away all the dregs left in the stomach after digestion, but is not aperient. Then I take 5 or 6 ounces of solid and 8 of liquid for breakfast, 8 ounces of solid and 8 of liquid for dinner, 3 ounces of solid and 8 of liquid for tea, 4 ounces of solid and 6 of liquid for supper, and the grog afterward, if I please. I am not, however, strictly limited to any quantity at either meal, so that the nature of the food is rigidly adhered to. Experience has taught me to believe that these human beings are the most insidious enemies man with a tendency to corpulence and advanced life can possess, though eminently friendly to youth. He may very prudently mount guard against such an enemy if he is not a fool to himself, and I fervently hope this truthful, unvarnished tale may lead him to make a trial of my plan, which I sincerely recommend to public notice, not with any ambitious motive, but in sincere good faith, to help my fellow creatures to obtain the marvelous blessings I have found within the short period of a few months. I do not recommend every corpulent man to rush headlong into such a change of diet, certainly not, but to act advisedly and after full consultation with a physician. My former dietary table was bread and milk for breakfast, or a pint of tea with plenty of milk and sugar, and buttered toast, meat, beer, much bread, of which I was always very fond, and pastry for dinner, the meal of tea similar to that of breakfast, and generally a fruit tart or bread and milk for supper. I had little comfort, and far less sound sleep. It certainly appears to me that my present dietary table is far superior to the former, more luxurious and liberal, independent of its blessed effect. But when it is proved to be more healthful, comparisons are simply ridiculous, and I can hardly imagine that any man, even in sound health, would choose the former, even if it were not an enemy. But when it is shown to be, as in my case, inimical both to health and comfort, I can hardly conceive that there is any man who would not willingly avoid it. I can conscientiously assert that I never lived so well as under the new plan of dietary, which I should have formerly thought a dangerous, extravagant trespass upon health. I am very much better, bodily and mentally, and pleased to believe that I hold the reins of health and comfort in my own hands, and though at 65 years of age I cannot expect to remain free from some coming natural infirmity that all flesh is heir to, I cannot at the present time complain of one. It is simply miraculous, and I am thankful to Almighty Providence for directing me through an extraordinary chance to the care of a man who could work such a change in so short a time. Oh, that the faculty would look deeper into and make themselves better acquainted with the crying evil of obesity, that dreadful, tormenting parasite on health and comfort. Their fellow men might not descend into early premature graves, as I believe many do, from what is termed apoplexy, and certainly would not, during their sojourn on earth, endure so much bodily and, consequently, mental infirmity. Corpulence, though giving no actual pain, as it appears to me, must naturally press with undue violence upon the bodily viscera, driving one part upon another, and stopping the free action of all. I am sure it did in my particular case, and the result of my experience is briefly as follows. I have not felt so well as now for the last 20 years. Have suffered no inconvenience whatever in the probational remedy. Am reduced many inches in bulk and 35 pounds in weight in 38 weeks. Come downstairs forward naturally, with perfect ease. Go upstairs and take ordinary exercise freely, without the slightest inconvenience. Can perform every necessary office for myself. The umbilical rupture is greatly ameliorated and gives me no anxiety. My sight is restored, my hearing improved. My other bodily ailments are ameliorated, indeed, almost passed into matters of history. I have placed a thank-offering of 50 pounds in the hands of my kind medical adviser for distribution amongst his favorite hospitals, after gladly paying his usual fees, and still remain under overwhelming obligations for his care and attention, which I can never hope to repay. Most thankful to Almighty Providence for mercies received, and determined to press the case into public notice as a token of gratitude. I have the pleasure to afford, in conclusion, a satisfactory confirmation of my report in stating that a corpulent friend of mine, who, like myself, is possessed of a generally sound constitution, was laboring under frequent palpitations of the heart and sensations of fainting, was, at my instigation, induced to place himself in the hands of my medical adviser with the same gradual beneficial results. He is at present under the same ordeal, and in 8 weeks has profited even more largely than I did in that short period. He has lost the palpitations, and is becoming, so to speak, a new-made man, thankful to me for advising, and grateful to the eminent counselor to whom I referred him, and he looks forward with good hope to a perfect cure. I am fully persuaded that hundreds, if not thousands, of our fellow men might profit equally by a similar course. But, constitutions not being all alike, a different course of treatment may be advisable for the removal of so tormenting an affliction. My kind and valued medical adviser is not a doctor for obesity, but stands on the pinnacle of fame in the treatment of another malady, which, as he well knows, is frequently induced by the disease of which I am speaking, and sincerely trust most of my corpulent friends, and there are thousands of corpulent people whom I dare not so rank, may be led into my tram road. To any such I am prepared to offer the further key of knowledge by naming the man. It might seem invidious to do so now, but I shall only be too happy if applied to by letter in good faith, or if any doubt should exist as to the correctness of this statement. William Banting, Sr., late of number 27 St. James Street, Piccadilly, now of number 4 The Terrace, Kensington, May 1863. Addenda. Having exhausted the first edition, 1,000 copies, of the foregoing pamphlet, and a period of 1 year having elapsed since commencing the admirable course of diet which has led to such inestimable beneficial results, and, as I expected and desired, having quite succeeded in attaining the happy medium of weight and bulk I had so long ineffectually sought, which appears necessary to health at my age and stature, I feel impelled, by a sense of public duty, to offer the results of my experience in a second edition. It has been suggested that I should have sold the pamphlet, devoting any profit to charity as more agreeable and useful, and I had intended to adopt such a course, but on reflection feared my motives might be mistaken. I therefore respectfully present this, like the first edition, to the public gratuitously, earnestly hoping the subject may be taken up by medical men and thoroughly ventilated. It may, and I hope will, be as satisfactory to the public to hear as it is for me to state that the first edition has been attended with very comforting results to other sufferers from corpulence, as the remedial system therein described was to me under that terrible disease, which was my main object in publishing my convictions on the subject. It has, moreover, attained a success, produced flattering compliments, and an amount of attention I could hardly have imagined possible. The pleasure and satisfaction this has afforded me is ample compensation for the trouble and expense I have incurred, and I most sincerely trust, as I verily believe, this second edition will be accomplished by similar satisfactory results from a more extensive circulation. If so, it will inspirit me to circulate further editions, whilst a corpulent person exists, requiring, as I think, this system of diet, or so long as my motives cannot be mistaken, and are thankfully appreciated. My weight is reduced 46 pounds, and as the very gradual reductions which I am able to show may be interesting to many, I have great pleasure in stating them, believing they serve to demonstrate further the merit of the system pursued. My girth is reduced around the waist in tailor phraseology, 12 1/4 inches, which extent was hardly conceivable even by my friends or my respected medical adviser until I put on my former clothing over what I now wear, which was thoroughly convincing proof of the remarkable change. These important desiderata have been attained by the most easy and comfortable means, with but little medicine, and almost entirely by a system of diet that formerly I should have thought dangerously generous. I am told by all who know me that my personal appearance is greatly improved, and that I seem to bear the stamp of good health. This may be a matter of opinion or friendly remark, but I can honestly assert that I feel restored in health, bodily and mentally, appear to have more muscular power and vigor, eat and drink with a good appetite, and sleep well. All symptoms of acidity, indigestion, and heartburn, with which I was frequently tormented, have vanished. I have left off using boot hooks and other such aids, which were indispensable, but being now able to stoop with ease and freedom, are unnecessary. I have lost the feeling of occasional faintness, and what I think a remarkable blessing and comfort is that I have been able safely to leave off knee bandages, which I have worn necessarily for 20 past years, and given up a truss almost entirely. Indeed, I believe I might wholly discard it with safety, but am advised to wear it at least occasionally, for the present. Since publishing my pamphlet, I have felt constrained to send a copy of it to my former medical advisers and to ascertain their opinions on the subject. They did not dispute or question the propriety of the system, but either dared not venture its practice upon a man of my age, or thought it too great a sacrifice of personal comfort to be generally advised or adopted, and I fancy neither of them appeared to feel the fact of the misery of corpulence. One eminent physician, as I before stated, assured me that increasing weight was a necessary result of advancing years. Another, equally eminent, to whom I have been directed by a very friendly third, who had most kindly but ineffectually failed in a remedy, added to my weight in a few weeks instead of abating the evil. These facts lead me to believe the question is not sufficiently observed or even regarded. The great charm and comfort of the system is that its effects are palpable within a week of trial, which creates a natural stimulus to persevere for a few weeks more, when the fact becomes established beyond all question. I only entreat all persons suffering from corpulence to make a fair trial for just 1 clear month, as I am well convinced they will afterwards pursue a course which yields such extraordinary benefit till entirely and effectually relieved, and, be it remembered, by the sacrifice merely of simple food, for the advantage of more generous and comforting food. The simple dietary evidently adds fuel to the fire, whereas the superior and liberal seems to extinguish it. I am delighted to be able to assert that I have proved the great merit and advantage of the system by its result in several other cases similar to my own, and have full confidence that within the next 12 months I shall know of many more cases restored from the disease of corpulence, for I have received the kindest possible letters from many afflicted strangers and friends, as well as similar personal observations from others whom I have conversed with, and assurances from most of them that they will kindly inform me of the results for my own private satisfaction. Many are practicing the diet after consultation with their own medical advisers. Some few have gone to mine, and others are practicing upon their own convictions of the advantages detailed in the pamphlet, though I recommend all to act advisedly in case their constitutions should differ. I am, however, so perfectly satisfied of the great unerring benefits of this system of diet that I shall spare no trouble to circulate my humble experience. The amount and character of my correspondence on the subject has been strange and singular, but most satisfactory to my mind and feelings. I am now in that happy, comfortable state that I should not hesitate to indulge in any fancy in regard to diet, but if I did so, should watch the consequences, and not continue any course which might add to weight or bulk and consequent discomfort. Is not the system suggestive to artists and men of sedentary employment who cannot spare time for exercise, consequently become corpulent and clog the little muscular action with a superabundance of fat, thus easily avoided? Pure, genuine bread may be the staff of life, as it is termed. It is so particularly in youth. But I feel certain it is more wholesome in advanced life, if thoroughly toasted, as I take it. My impression is that any starchy or saccharine matter tends to the diseases of corpulence in advanced life, and whether it be swallowed in that form or generated in the stomach, that all things tending to these elements should be avoided, of course always under sound medical authority. William Banting. William Banting's Weight Tables. My weight on 26th of August, 1862, was 202 pounds. On 7th September, it was 200, having lost 2 pounds. 27th September, 197, having lost 3 more. 19th October, it was 193 pounds, having lost 4 more. 9th November, it was 190 pounds, having lost 3 more. 3rd December, it was 187 pounds, having lost 3 more. 24th December, it was 184 pounds, having lost 3 more. 14th January, 1863, was 182 pounds, having lost 2 more. 4th February, it was 180 pounds, having lost 2 more. 25th February, it was 178 pounds, having lost 2 more. 18th March, it was 176 pounds, having lost 2 more. 8th April, it was 173 pounds, having lost 3 more. 29th April, 170 pounds, having lost 3 more. 20th May, 167 pounds, having lost 3 more. 10th June, 164 pounds, having lost 3 more. 1st July, 161 pounds, having lost 3 more. 22nd July, 159 pounds, having lost 2 more. 12th August, 157 pounds, having lost 2 more. 26th August, 156 pounds, having lost 2 more. 12th September, 156 pounds, having lost no more. Total loss of weight, 46 pounds.
I tried to come up with a recipe that might have been on William Banting's table, but English cooking being so simple, boiled or roasted meats, sautéed or simmered fish, and the like, especially in the Victorian era, it took me a while. But hey, you get 2 recipes instead of just 1. T-bone with anchovy butter and walnuts, and the recipe for the anchovy butter itself. I don't know if a dish of this sort graced William Banting's table, but all the ingredients were known and available. Click on the link below or go to carbsmart.com/podcast29recipe and enjoy. Share this podcast with everyone you think might like it because we want more listeners. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell because you don't want to miss a single episode. Until next time, stay low carb, happy, and healthy.